This is Drew Fedorka. We are at the Public History Center in Sanford, Florida. It is Saturday, November 16th, 2013. And if you just want to introduce yourself to the camera.
I'm Nancy Ford, and actually Nancy Harris Ford. My maiden name is Harris. I grew up here in Sanford, left, was gone about 36 years and came back.
Okay, and when did you leave Sanford?
I left Sanford in 1973, about a year after I graduated from Seminole High School.
Okay, and what brought you back to Sanford?
A combination of things. One is home, and in 2008, when the economy did what it did, I found myself unemployed, and I needed to make some choices. So I chose to come home where I had a support system.
Okay. Now, did you have any interest in Sanford's history before getting involved with Celery Soup and Creative Sanford?
Not really, because I am Sanford's history. You know, a lot of the things that they do in Creative Sanford, in the shows that they write, I remember. So I'm not just learning them. I am learning new facts about these things, but a lot of the stories, they're my stories, some of them. And I remember these things.
Right. And
So it's interesting that what you call history, I call my life.
Right, of course. Yeah, okay. All right, so what got you interested in Creative Sanford?
Well, when I came back, my sisters knew that I was interested in acting and performing because I had done it when I was in Memphis. And she saw an advertisement for the show, for Touch and Go, and asked me if I would like to go. So we went to see it, and I thought it was so interesting. So I said, well, I think I'll audition the next time around. So the next time around, I auditioned, and I really enjoyed it. So I've auditioned every time since.
Okay, right. And so you play a number of different characters in Remade, Not By. You want to go through some of the different characters?
It was interesting. I played Tasha in the continuity scenes, who was the mother of one of the young ladies. And that role, the continuity scenes were designed to link the stories together so that they made sense. And I also played Tasha's mother in one of the scenes, remembering when the, I guess the Woolworths counter, or one of those restaurants, and I actually remember when we used to go to the back window to get food at the restaurants. We couldn't go in and sit down. I remember that. So I played that character, and then I played Dr. Starke's wife in another scene. And the Tasha character just kind of weaved through most of the show.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that you said a lot of these things you had been touched on in your own personal life that you experienced. What role do you think community theater plays in a community understanding its own history and remembering its own history?
Well, I think that it's really important because if we don't remember our past, especially the things that are not very pleasant, then we're doomed to repeat it. You know, I have a son who's 20, and he would get tired of me telling him sometimes that when he wanted these shoes and these clothes that cost so much money, and I would tell him, well, you know, when I was growing up, my mama bought our clothes and hoped they fit. And most of the time bought them too large because we couldn't try them on, and she couldn't take them back because we were colored. You know, so especially for European Americans, we know a lot of your history because we were exposed to it in the commercials on television and stuff like that. But our history was kind of downplayed. And even among ourselves, we don't realize sometimes the richness. When I say ourselves, the African American community, sometimes we don't understand or really fully realize the richness of our history and the importance that certain things played. It was just kind of the way we lived.
Right, and so some of these scenes, obviously they're dealing with some of the more troubling or challenging aspects of Sanford's history. In what ways, let me think how to phrase it. And does it change the memory of these experiences at all in some of these scenes?
It doesn't change the memory, it changes the meaning. For example, the butterfly scene.
Mm-hmm.
I remember school integration. So when I'm going through that, I remember, and people say that I played that scene and it seemed so real, because I really was angry about school integration. Although, for me, it was the opposite. It was me going to the white school, so to speak, not the other way around, as it was in the butterfly scene. But I didn't want to be there. I had no choice. I got thrown into an environment that I feel changed my life in a way that was not for the best. When I was at Crohn's, I was an honor student. I was in National Honor Society. I was on track to be Val or Sal. And when I went to Seminole, I did not get the same attention that I got at Crohn's, because the curriculum was so different and the books were different, because we got hand-me-down books at Crohn's. Things were so different that I wasn't academically prepared. And even though I did well, I was in and out of the Honor Society at Seminole. And I didn't go to college, and I found out later about work studies. I wasn't counseled. So I didn't know. I didn't know what was available to me, and I didn't graduate college until I was 50. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I got shoved into an environment where I wasn't welcome. I didn't feel welcome.
It seemed like watching Remade and Not Bought, there's a very specific choice of scenes, the types of topics that are touched on. I think of the swimming pool scene, I think of the butterfly scene, which is obviously one of the main highlights of the show. The one at the restaurant that you just explained. What was the decision-making process in which scenes to highlight?
Well, I wasn't really involved in that. So I wasn't involved in choosing what scenes went into the play. You'd have to talk to the playwrights about that.
Right, okay. Do you feel like there's any... Obviously, I mean, there's some of these scenes are just kind of arbitrary in the way that, in the topics that they're, obviously the big topic that they're looking to reconcile is Sanford's history of racial tensions, and they've picked little snapshots to touch on them. Do you think there's any that would have been more effective to include?
Well, I don't know about effectiveness, because I think the scenes that they included were very effective. There's so many from which to choose. And I think the ones that they chose showed different aspects of the racial tension, like the pool scene. I don't know how to swim. I never learned. There were 2 pools in Sanford. The white pool we weren't allowed to go to. The black pool was always so crowded when it was open that you couldn't swim in there if you tried. And the beach, well, there were no lifeguards at the beach where we were allowed to go. We go to New Smyrna Beach. And our parents were afraid to put us in the water because they were, fearful for our safety. And every summer, kids drowned. Every summer. So our parents were very fearful of that. So those kinds of things, were really meaningful. The only thing, and I have spoken with them about this, that it seems that in every one of these plays I play the angry black woman. But we had some good times in the African American community as well. And sometimes I'd like to see that highlighted. Like we had church picnics and things like that. And because they highlight some things that have nothing to do with racial tension with the white characters. But almost all the scenes that involve African Americans have some type of racial overtone. Even the Starke scene, even though it wasn't an uncomfortable thing, but even that had racial overtones, and there were other things that we did You know, they had nothing to do with race. They had nothing to do with white people either. But you know, a lot of the scenes that they used for whites had nothing to do with black people.
Right. What do you see what Creative Sanford does and what Celery Soup does, especially with plays like Remade, Not Bought? Do you see as what they're doing in history, or is it something different?
It's both. It's history with creative license because it's entertainment. And I think it's a good way to get a conversation going. Because when people go and they see these shows, then invariably, even participating, I learn things. And then I go and I do research. Like Dr. Starke was my doctor. Dr. Starke brought me in the world. You know, when I was born, he was the doctor who brought me here. He was my doctor growing up. But there were things that I didn't know about him because why would I want to go and study about Dr. Starke? But now, in retrospect, I went out on the internet and did research because I do want to know now. You know, so there are, and almost everybody that I speak with, after they've seen this show, they say, I didn't know this or I didn't know that. So yeah, it's a good way to get a conversation started.
And it's interesting that you mentioned Dr. Starke because he is featured prominently throughout the play. In what ways do you think he was a good choice to highlight as a central example for some of the messages they're looking to get across?
Well, one thing is that he was biracial, you know, and that's one of the reasons that he was able to do some of the things that he did, because he was fair, his skin was fair, his hair was wavy. But he was a very quiet man, soft-spoken man. But like they said in the play, he was a good man. And I remember going to him up through my teenage years, you know, until I left here, he was my doctor. I don't ever remember paying him. I imagine my mother paid him. I don't know whether she paid him or not. But it never occurred to me that he wasn't getting paid. That's not something kids think about, you know. And I know that I went to him once for something, and he said, well, tell Bernie such and such and such. That was my mom's name. So he knew his patients. It's not like now you go to the doctor and they review your chart to remember who you are. You know, they make notes in your chart so that they can have conversation with you. But if I walked in his office, he knew me. He knew my name, he knew my mother's name, he knew my grandparents. It was very different. And I didn't realize that, well, I didn't think about the fact that he saw white people too. You know, I don't ever remember seeing white people in his office. I imagine they were there, but, you know, that wasn't something that I thought about, because, you know, if he saw white people, it was because they couldn't afford to pay the white doctor. And that was not uncommon in the black community, because we didn't carry around a lot of the baggage, it seems, that many of the white people did.
What are some of the memories you have of Dr. Starke from your childhood?
Well, I remember one time that I didn't like shots. I was actually very afraid of shots, and I needed to get a shot. And it was a booster shot in the buttocks. And Dr. Starke had me stand at the window and look out the window, and he was talking to me. I don't remember what he was talking to me about. I also don't remember getting the shot. Just, it was so much like the scene in the play. And when I saw that, it was like, you know, he really was like that. That was not an exaggeration.
What role do you think the play has in linking the memory of Sanford in the 20th century to people like Dr. Starke?
Well, I think especially for a lot of the kids, it helps you to know your history. History is important, even though I didn't realize it when I was young, because I did not like history in school. Didn't like it at all. And now I'm more interested in it because I can see how, what they call progress, you know, the continuity of events, and how it progressed from here to there to the next step. You know, Sanford was known as the Celery City. Well, I can remember what that smells like. Interestingly enough, because my grandfather ran a celery crew. So I used to play on the bus, on his bus, and it's a very distinct smell. And I remember what it smells like. I also remember what it smelled like when those celery fields were rotten, because Celery Avenue is named Celery Avenue for a reason. There weren't houses down there when I was growing up. Those were celery fields. And so people don't know why that street is named Celery Avenue. And there's Celery Key and there's Celery something else. Well, those are housing developments now, but they used to be celery fields.
And to bring it back to Dr. Starke's office was near Celery Avenue.
Well, it's on the corner of 11th Street and Sanford Avenue. So Celery Avenue is what 13th Street kind of turns into after it makes that little catacorner. So yeah, it's pretty close. And we used to walk. We walk pretty much everywhere. Now we don't hardly think about walking these days.
Would you say Dr. Starke was well known in the community?
I'd say that's an understatement.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he was the black doctor. So all the black folks went to him. We didn't, because the white doctors wouldn't see us. But that doesn't mean he wasn't a good doctor. He was probably one of the best doctors in town, but we didn't realize that because he was our doctor. He was the only doctor we knew.
And was he well known at the time, at least within Sanford, for his role in sort of crossing that color barrier by obviously white patients coming to see him? Was that well known in the community?
Well, it may have, excuse me, it may have been by adults, but I was a child, so that wasn't something that I thought about.
Right.
So, I know that he was a prominent figure. Everybody knew him, and Dr. Ringland too. He wasn't in the play, but Dr. Ringland was the dentist, the black dentist, and they shared an office. They shared office space. Because when you went to the doctor or you went to the dentist, you went to the same building.
Okay, just a couple of final questions to bring it back to Remade, Not Bought. You said one of the main roles of productions like that is just to get a conversation started. What types of messages would you hope have gotten across from a production like Remade, Not Bought?
Well, I would hope that some healing happens, because there's a lot of bitterness still in the community among both blacks and whites. There's anger. We've come a long way. We still have a ways to go. A lot of blacks are bitter and angry because we feel, when I say we, when I say blacks and whites, I don't mean all of any group, but many of us as a people feel that we've struggled. And I know personally in my own life, because my name is Nancy, I got into doors that I would not have gotten into if my name had been something else. But when I walked in the door, say for an interview, I could see the countenance on the interviewer's face change, because I was not what they expected. My maiden name is Harris. My name is Nancy Harris. I'm well spoken, I'm articulate. When you speak with me on the phone, you don't necessarily know that I'm an African American, but when I walk in the door, it's obvious. And that hurts. And every time that happens, it hurts. So there's scars there, they're deep scars, and they need healing. By the same token, I went through affirmative action, where a lot of white people felt left out. And I had work as a result of affirmative action, a pretty good job. I was a machinist. And in that shop, and I was in Rochester, New York, where they thought things were better. And the white guys in there would yell things at me across the shop and tell me that I was taking the food out of some guy's family's mouth because I shouldn't be there, because I'm black and female. So when we have these kinds of conversations, It gives us an opportunity to know that we're all human, all a part of the same race, the human one, and that we all have feelings and they should be honored, and that we all have rich culture and tradition. And I think it's important for us to learn about each other's culture more and more so that we can appreciate our differences and move forward. Because in order to hold a person down, you have to stay down there with them. And it's important for us all to rise.
Do you think Celery Soup and Remade Not Bought, it puts a very positive spin on a lot of these memories? And do you think it does it effectively in this healing process?
Yes, I think it does. You know, I think anytime we address these things head on, that it's effective. It may not always feel good, but it's like a shot. Doesn't feel good when you're getting it, but when it does its work, the benefit feels good.
Okay. Thank you very much for all your help. Would you have any last thing you want to say about Celery Soup, or just the importance of it, the importance of community theater, the importance of approaching a community's history in this manner?
Well, I just like to say that I'm very happy that this project exists, that Creative Sanford exists, and that Creative Sanford sees the benefit of doing this work. And I hope that people will support it. You know, theater is not well supported in general, and in particular community theater. We have a lot of good actors and actresses in community theater. One of the things that I love about Celery Soup is that everyone who auditions gets cast. And even though I had experience coming into it, it's a wonderful opportunity for people who have never been on a stage before to get out there and see if they like it, and have an opportunity to go someplace, because this is a way that there are a lot of people that we see on television and on the big screen who got their start in community theater. It's important, and I think it should be valued, and people should support it.
Well, thank you very much
Thank
for all
you.
your thoughts.